Welcome into the High School OT studios here in Raleigh. It has been a wild first Friday night of the high school football playoffs in North Carolina. Games are beginning to go final, and we have all of the action for you here on the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. Like all of these crazy football games that we're about to get into across the first round, it takes a lot of teamwork to win, and it does to have to start the conversation to stop underage drinking, and that's what you can do with our partners at Talk It Out NC. Visit talkitoutnc.org. Again, that's talkitoutnc.org, and you can get all the tools that you need to start the conversation today about stopping underage drinking. We're going to get through some scores from around the state of North Carolina, but first, I'm going to bring in Joel Bryant, who has been breaking it all down today. Joel, this could not have been scripted any more wildly as we look at some of these scores coming in the first round.
Yeah, lots of one-score games. I have to say the 16-17 matchups in the RPI seeding have largely been a big success. I mean, RPI is getting a lot of the stuff right in terms of the closest of teams. A couple of those games ended like literally by a 1-point difference. So yeah, so far so good for the new RPI system. Bad night in the 3-3-6 across the board. It's a wide area code. It extends from, frankly, the mountains to Mebane in that area. Bad across the board. East County had some bad losses, so we're going to get into all of that. Good night for the mountains, and decent night for the 919, I think, and good night for the 704. So we'll get into all of that.
Before we start jumping in and bringing some guests on to this week's show, just early initial reaction. What is your biggest upset that you've seen come across so far, Joel?
Yeah, so West Stanley, I think, was the last team that made it into the 4A playoffs. They were the 24 seed in the 4A West. They were 1-9 this season. They went on the road and beat Lexington 24-22. Lexington is one of those 3-3-6 teams I mentioned. It was not a good night for 3-3-6. And there's always so much talk. There was this talk last year, and there's been this talk this year of like people see these 1-9 teams and 2-win teams make the playoffs, and every single time I think they end up at least competing. And then now in this case, a 1-win team, West Stanley, goes on the road and beats Lexington. Literally the lowest seeded team wins 24-22 over Lexington. So that's got to be the biggest one of the night so far.
All right, we're going to bring you every final score that happened tonight in North Carolina from every bracket. We're going to start in the 6A East tonight, where, as Joel mentioned, these 16-17 matchups across the board were absolutely wild. Harnett Central defeating Southview tonight 40-37. That was back and forth, and Harnett Central wins it in the final seconds of that game. E.E. Smith, they had an early lead in this one over Terry Sanford, but it's the Bulldogs who come away with the 49-20 win. Franklinton, they pick up a 28-6 win over Grays Creek. Lee County, a game-winning field goal. The Yellow Jackets defeating Westover tonight, 21-20. Lee County is now going to travel to Union Pines to face the Vikings for the second time this season. West Brunswick defeating West Johnston 35-6. J.H. Rose a big win over Triton 47-10. South Johnston a 47-7 win over Vance County. And then an upset here, White Oak. They go on the road to Eastern Guilford and pick up a 32-22 win. Our friend Chris Miller with the Jacksonville Daily News reported earlier tonight. That is White Oak's first playoff win since 2004. Quite the accomplishment, but let's run right back up to that 16-17 matchup. That is where J. Mike Blake was tonight for High School OT, covering a wild one, and it is one that Harnett Central wins in a shootout, J. Mike, 40-37. How do you even begin to sum up the chaos that happened in the back half of that game?
Good question. I know that's what I get paid to do, is try to put this thing into a story form. It was just, would you believe this game was 0-0 after the first quarter? But it got to a point where you just felt like whoever has the ball last, like all of a sudden both defenses could not stop the other from getting just huge chunk plays and scoring drives. Sometimes a scoring drive would be super quick. Southview scored in 30 seconds to start off the second half. And then sometimes the scoring drive would be methodical and just wear each other down. But they were always scoring. All right, we had 11 touchdowns in all, plus a safety that really made this. Hardin Central left some points on the board with extra points, and then a safety, which did not need to happen. Receiver catches the ball at the 15, tries to reverse field, reverses way too much field, winds up in the end zone, gets and hits a teammate and falls down into safety. But just a huge night for Kobe Howard. He only completed 13 passes. Those 13 passes went for 295 yards
Wow.
and 5 touchdowns. He had an 84-yarder and a 54-yarder and a 59-yarder. And then when they were driving, I have to throw out Rashawn Townsend as well. 21 carries, 148 yards. He had some angry runs, falling forward, falling over people. On the last drive, they have a minute 31 left, and they have a decent, ways to go. But they handed off to him on like the first 3 or so plays. They have their timeouts, and he's getting 12, 13 yards on first down, and it sets up a kind of a short field for Howard. Howard rolls out as if he's going to option pitch it, and it's RPO. All of a sudden, then Cole Thompson, who's been hanging out, as if he's kind of blocking on as a wide receiver, he takes off, and Howard hits him with a strike on the run, 30-yard touchdown with just 36 seconds left, and that's the winning score. I mean, really, if there had been more than 36 seconds left, who knows if Southview would have run, because they had some guys tonight who are really just warriors running forward, running over people every time. Southview scored with one of the craziest plays I've seen all year, and I've seen a lot of them. They scored with a minute 31 left because Jamal Brown finds Amon Carmichael, beautifully designed play, a little screen pass in the middle, actually kind of faked screen pass to one wide receiver for him to kind of come back and almost like a tunnel screen in the dead middle of the field. He catches it, picks up great blocks, and I mean, he broke probably 5 or more tackles on his way to the end zone, going all the way to the opposite sideline, still breaking tackles. We can't even see whose tackles he's breaking. I thought that was going to be the game winner. Instead, too much time for Harness Central. What a fantastic way to start off. And I looked this up while we're talking about first, because this is going to be a big thing tonight. People getting their first playoff win since fill in the blank. And because that's what is done in other sports for us when we have more teams making the playoffs. Harness Central, this is their second playoff win in the last 3 years. You may think, okay, that's not that bad of a drought. But that's also number 2 playoff wins since going to the state championship in 2009. They had only won 1 playoff game since being a state runner-up. Tonight, they double that. And that to me is pretty cool. They have some weapons on offense. I know they have a tall task going to Jacksonville, but it's going to be. I think Harness Central has to feel good about what they did tonight.
Before I let you go, J. Mike, just real quick, you had one of many crazy 16-17 games tonight. What is your take on this playoff format now that we have 8 classes? This first round hasn't missed.
Yeah, I know some people, like Joel was saying, people get really hung up on how is this team in or that team in. The same thing, like people were hung up on other teams missing the playoffs for so long. This was the natural response is, okay, better to have too many than too few. Let the chips fall where they may. A number of the top teams, I mean, you can't argue with the teams that have first round buys, in my opinion. They get to sit back and let everyone else play tonight, which to me is more fair than a few teams getting a bye. And all the changes are all at once kind of working together. And I think that is surprising for me. I hope people don't overreact and try to change one little thing, as North Carolina's coaches tend to do, because the RPI change I was skeptical of. It seems to have really worked. Certainly changing the conference champions automatically get first seed has really balanced the bracket. That was the biggest thing that needed to happen. And then expanding the playoff, essentially letting more teams out of each classification in. You can say it cheapens the playoffs, but honestly, not for the teams that are winning, not for the teams that it certainly doesn't cheapen a state championship in a few weeks. So the only thing it makes it a little bit different is it's easier to make the playoffs, but it's not easier, I think, to get that win because you are paired up according to your seed, who you should be facing. and you have that another opportunity next week. I'm kind of surprised at how well it's all worked out. As someone who I've seen a lot of different things, I was a little skeptical.
Yeah, we don't have to argue about this tonight, but winning one of 4 state championships is slightly more special than winning one of 8. But we can have that argument another time. I do want to mention, so tonight, J. Mike, you're at that Harlan Central Southview game. Harlan Central, members of the Carolina Pines 6A conference. We were talking about this conference all season, how competitive it was. Tonight, 4-1 against other conferences. The only team that lost was Triton to J.H. Rose. South Johnson blew out Vance County. West Johnson blew out West Brunswick, and Lee County with that last-second field goal over Westover. So good night for the Carolina Pines, 6A, 4-1 in the round 1. And, of course, Union Pines has the bye. So
yeah,
5-1, I guess.
And that conference, or the teams that make up that conference in previous years, they've struggled in the playoffs, right? I mean, Harlan Central is the second-place team in the Carolina Pines this year. Again, you have to go back to 2009 before they won more than one postseason game. So it's a big bounce back year for them, which is good to see. Again, that's another kind of outgrowth of having this extra round, if you will, is that a lot of teams get to feel a little bit better about how they're able to go in at the end of the season, play a team that they would never play in a regular season. South Johnson's never scheduling Vance County. And then beat them and say, hey, look at us. Like, maybe our league was that tough. I think that's a neat thing.
That was J. Mike Blake. He had Harnett Central's wild win tonight over Southview. That was 40-37, came down to the final 36 seconds of that one. J. Mike will have that story and more coverage up tonight on HighSchoolOT.com. Thanks, J. Mike.
No problem.
Let's keep going around the state here. We talked about the 6A East. Let's now talk about the 6A West. St. Stephen's and Mount Tabor are tangled up in overtime right now. At last check, St. Stephen's jumped ahead to take a 24-23 lead over the Spartans. More scores for you. AC Reynolds, a big win over South Caldwell. Olympic shutting out Ragsdale tonight. Central Cabarrus goes on the road and picks up a 38-10 win over Southeast Guilford. Statesville defeating Alexander Central. Dudley, they were tied 14-14 with Glenn in the second half, and then the Panthers go off for 3 touchdowns to win that one, 35-14. Kings Mountain ahead of Ben L. Smith and Asheville, a big win over Western Guilford tonight. As Joel mentioned, some of the Mountain teams finding a lot of success in the opening round. Let's go from 6A. Let's go out to the 7A East. That's where Fuquay Varina defeated Holly Springs tonight 29-7. Ashley comes up to the triangle and beats Cary 14-13, one of many one-score games in the first round tonight. Sanderson 41-6 over East Wake. Wake Forest a big win over North Brunswick 59-28. New Hanover, a 2-score win over Heritage. Southern Durham, the conference champions out there in the Bull City, a 28-14 win over Heritage. New Bern defeating Overhills. And how about this score? South Garner 62, South Central 14. A huge win there for South Garner. Out in the 7A West, West Cabarrus, a 1-point win on the road at R.J. Reynolds tonight. Davie County 19-0 against West Mecklenburg. A.L. Brown holds on and defeats South Iredell 34-27 the final there. Butler, a 2-score win against Hopewell. Page, a huge shutout against McDowell. Porter Ridge hangs on and defeats Cuthbertson 26-16. A shutout victory for East Forsyth against Purnell Sweat. That is 63-0. And then Marvin Ridge hosting Chapel Hill 52-13. The final in that one. One more bracket one more classification here before we bring in some more guests on the High School OT postgame show. Palisades, a 35-32 win in the 8A West against South Mecklenburg. West Forsyth, a big win over Northwest Guilford, 43-7. How about this one? Zion Haley, the quarterback at Chambers, scores in the final seconds to pick up an upset victory at Pinecrest, 32-31. Captain Munnerlin, his first win with Chambers in the playoffs. They get an upset. Providence, a 1-score win over Ardrey Kell. That was a conference matchup. Out in the 8A East, Willow Spring goes down to the coast and picks up a 31-12 win. Rollsville shuts out Green Hope 49-0. Leesville Road, a 49-12 win over Broughton. And then Panther Creek, a 2-score win over Enloe. at that game was High School OT's Clay Best, and that's who joins us now as the Catamounts pick up a 27-14 win over the Eagles. Clay, this was a game coming in where Joel and I earlier today discussed that we didn't know who was going to win this one. It was really a toss-up, but in the end, it appeared that once it got past that kind of one-score margin, Panther Creek didn't look back.
Yeah, just a night where Panther Creek scores on the opening drive. Inlow does come back and get it to 7-6, but from that point on, it's really the Catamounts in control. Travis Woodard had a big night, 239 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. You get a couple of field goals from Kanoa McGee, a 34-yarder, a 36-yarder. They kick a field goal at the end of the last play of the first half to make it 17-6. I counted 24 plays on the night where Inlow had no yardage or lost yardage. Just a real impressive night for Panther Creek along the lines. Offensive line, of course, when you run for 270 yards in the playoffs, and defensively, lots of plays in the backfield, really keeping there weren't many plays where Inlow's speed guys were able to get away. Coach Sean Crocker talked about wanting to keep them kind of pinned inside. Don't let them get to the edge, and getting their guys up front, guys like Jason Oriole in one-on-one matchups with their offensive line. He had a couple of sacks, batted down a pass, a few tackles for loss. I kind of was like you guys. I expected a very tight game coming in, but it was just one where Panther Creek took control. No turnovers, kind of very few penalties on both sides actually in this game. But Panther Creek just stayed in control all night.
Are we thinking that this teaches us anything about the two conferences these teams were in? Because Enlow, was in the Cap 8. They were fourth in that conference. I think Panther Creek was also fourth, but in the Quad City 7, 8A, whatever that conference is called. It's got a long name. Do you think that teaches us anything about these two conferences, the fact that Panther Creek kind of won handily here?
I don't know. I'm like you guys. I remember the good old four classification days, and so the variance between, especially when you get in these combined conferences, I think we'll see more of this play out as these playoffs go on. And I mean, you think like the old Johnston County / Garner boy. I'm looking at the Greater News tonight, and
that's the best one.
There are 16 teams left in the 7A East, and 6 of them are from the Greater News River Conference. So, it's could be. I mean, I don't think Inlow didn't play bad. Panther Creek just didn't let them really do anything. It's one of those things where who knows if they played again next week. We might have that really tight game that we expected. We might have a game where Inlow comes out on top like this. But yeah, I see what you're saying about. It's just who knows with all these classifications and these mixed conferences and those kind of things.
It is a whole new world. I think when you couple it with Willow Springs' big win at Laney, I think that Quad City 7 conference is looking better today than I would have thought at any point in the season. So they're doing a good job in that conference. I'm curious, how do you think Panther Creek will match up against Millbrook? Have you seen Millbrook play? I can't remember.
I have not seen Millbrook.
Okay.
I track the results and that kind of thing. It seems like it's going to be a big task for whoever plays Millbrook whenever they play them. They kind of seem like that not that Roseville, and they kind of seem like that old Roseville Wake Forest behemoth. They seem like the Wake County behemoth this year. So I guess we will see. I'm interested to see how do these teams that had a week off, how do they come out next week? Because that's a very odd situation for high school kids. So I think that you wonder, does somebody slip up next week and either get upset, number one, or have a game that's much closer than you would expect it to be because they get off to a slow start. As all the coaches always tell us, these are 16 to 18-year-old kids. Who knows when anything? So a whole new world, as we say, and things get more interesting every week.
It's a good point because I've heard a lot of coaches are very scared of that, after that week. There was a time when they thought that we'd be getting 2 straight bye weeks for these teams with the byes because 8A is the less teams in that classification. They're thankful that that's not happening. But yeah, that's something that you're right. Coaches are very cognizant of that, especially considering how young these kids are and how just keeping them focused is half the battle.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because Panther Creek, they continue on here in the Cap 8 conference. Like Joel mentioned, they play Millbrook next week. Millbrook, one of the top seeds in the 8A East. Joel had a chance to catch up with Millbrook's head coach, Lamar Marshall, earlier today, kind of previewing what he's going to do, what he did this week during the bye, and then preparing for next Friday night's game. But again, that's Clay Best. He had Panther Creek's win over Enloe. You can go to HighSchoolOT, read more about that tonight, and we look forward to that matchup next Friday night. But we thank you for joining us tonight, Clay.
Sure. Have a good night.
And here is Joel catching up with Lamar Marshall earlier today. After that, we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll give you more scores from around the state. I know that's what everybody wants, is to see who's playing who and what those final scores are. But you're tuned into the HighSchoolOT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC.
And now we're joined by Coach Lamar Marshall, head football coach at Millbrook High School. Millbrook is the 2 seed in the 8A East playoffs, so they are off this week, of course. Congrats on the bye-week, Coach. How do you want to approach it this week? Obviously, there's different things you can do in the bye week. What was Millbrook's plan this week?
Right. Appreciate you. Hope you're doing well, Joe. Our approach was just to kind of treat it like a late season training camp, man. Just getting back to basics, a lot of fundamentals, a lot of special teams. We have done some situational things in practice. Just the time to reflect and do some self-scouting, get some guys healthy. We've been blessed with relative health throughout the season, but we've got normal bumps and bruises. So usually I'm not a big fan of bye weeks this late in the year, but it came at a good time for us this season.
And I'm sure you're pleased with the way that they end up sorting it out to where there wasn't going to be the 2 weeks for the teams to the bye. Obviously, you're still to take care of business and get to the next rounds and whatnot. But that bye week, the second bye week for 8A teams, is coming later, so it's not going to be back to back. I'm sure you were pleased with that.
Very pleased, man. Football is a rhythm game. It's a routine game. Both coaches and players, we're used to getting into the same routines on a weekly basis. So again, we're happy to be able to kind of not kick back and rest this week, but to breathe a little bit. We gave our guys 2 extra days off and actually practice Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to try to get back on our normal schedule. But yes, I'm glad it's not a double bye, so to speak, where you're essentially got 21 days in between games. So we'll be ready to play by next Friday.
So we're taping this before the Panther Creek Enloe game. That's the winner of that you're going to play next week. But just general question, what does a Coach Marshall scout look like? How does Millbrook approach scouting, the roles for that on the coaching staff, and just what does that look like?
We'll be prepared for both teams. Obviously, we are somewhat familiar with both teams, with both of them being here local. Enloe's a conference opponent. We actually played them less than a month ago, but also very familiar with Panther Creek. We get some cross film on them and so forth. So we prepared initial, game plans for both opponents. So we're not starting from scratch. Starting tonight and early tomorrow morning when when that game is finished. But the biggest thing, man, we're always primarily concerned with ourselves. So we did a lot of self-scouting this week, as we do every week, and just always want to be focused on the controllables. And the controllables are what we do in our own building, controlling our own habits, and then ultimately our own execution. So, everyone to a large degree is who they are at this time of the year, and we're no exception to that. So we're just trying to smooth that stone and kind of perfect our own craft.
Gotcha. So I think coming into the season, no one was worried about the defense at all, and it's proven true. I mean, you're giving up 5.5 points a game. It's pretty good. I think some of the questions were on offense. There was new pieces. Bryson Gray was a full time starter this year, and he's done well. He's got 21 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. The offense in general has done really well. What's been your takeaway from that side of the ball, and what's some ways that that side has kind of evolved? Maybe ways that you weren't really expecting or ways you're pleased with?
Yeah, well, it all starts with our defense. Our defense has put our offense in a lot of short field situations, giving us great field position, created a lot of turnovers. I think we're plus 24 in turnover margin throughout the season. So, but our guys have grown a lot on that side of the ball. We pretty much had an entirely new offensive line other than Preston Avery, our only returning starter. But those guys have meshed well together. And I think we've grown to the point where we've expanded our comfort zone throughout the year. Earlier in the year, we were pretty much a smash mouth football team, run the ball down the hill. And we still like to think of ourselves as such. But our brand new receiving core, for the most part, with the exception of Malachi Gilchrist, who's a 3-year starter for us, has come together and we've gotten in a good rhythm. And you said it yourself, man. Bryson Gray has been a steady leader for us throughout the season. He hadn't seen it all, but he's seen a lot at this point in his career. He's been in a lot of big games. Last year as a part-time starter and this year as a full-time guy. So we feel really good about that side of the ball as well. And, of course, our coaching staff, we've got a great coaching staff to lean on offense as well as defense, too. So those guys have been a great support system for our players and for myself. So feel really good, going into round 2 of the playoffs.
Good stuff. Well, Coach, really appreciate the time today. You enjoy that game tonight, and then we'll see you next week as 2 seed Millbrook faces off against whoever wins in the second round of the AA East playoffs. Coach, appreciate the time.
Yes, sir.
Raising kids is a roller coaster. Sometimes you laugh, sometimes you cry, but most times you wonder how your kid turned out so well. That's how. You did the hard work, made the right decisions, like talking about alcohol before it could be a problem. Go to talkitoutnc.org. Get resources on how to talk about underage drinking. So Mom, Dad, keep up the good work. It's worth it. Talk early. Talk often. Talk It Out NC.
Welcome back to the Talk It Out NC post-game show here on HighSchoolOT. Lots of first-round scores to get to, but before we do that, we'd like to mention there's never a bad time to start that conversation about ending underage drinking. Just visit talkitoutnc.org. You can get the resources and the tools that you need to start those conversations today. You can start them with your peers or your child to help end underage drinking. Let's get into some more scores from around the state here in the first round of the NCHSA state playoffs. We've already covered 8A, 7A, and 6A, so let's get into the 5A East, and this is what scores look like from the first round of action. Eastern Alamance a shutout victory over Fike tonight, 35-0. Southeast Alamance a 42-0 win over Orange. Havelock, they pick up a shutout as well, 47-0. Here's where the crazy ones begin. Seaforth 29-28 over South Brunswick. Person goes on the road. Look at this score, 68-58 the final against JF Webb. West Carteret, a 35-21 win over CB Aycock. Western Alamance falls. South Granville goes on the road. They get the 20-12 win. And then how about this one? I mentioned 68-58. How about 58-50? That is what Dixon does tonight on the road at Rockingham County. That is a double overtime final score there. Dixon, 58-50. Over Rockingham County. More scores from around the state of North Carolina. Let's get into the 5A West, where Irwin picks up a 49-21 win on the road at Hunter Huss. West Rowan defeating Southern Guilford tonight, 41-23. West Henderson, 42-7 over East Rowan. Concord, a 29-28 win over Forest View. Montgomery Central, the upset win, 37 over Carson. 40-28, Forest Hills defeats Smoky Mountain. Oak Grove defeats North Lincoln 30-8, and North Davidson runs away with a big 46-8 win over North Henderson. Now out to the 4A East. That is where Red Springs goes on the road and wins 37-12 at Jordan Matthews. Eastern Wayne defeats Anson 24-14. North Pitt picks up a 44-7 win over Cummings, and Carver hangs on to defeat Moorhead 16-14. North Johnston a 42-35 win over Washington. Southwest Edgecombe winning 50-0 against Southwest Onslow. Clinton defeating Ledford tonight. The Dark Horses are off to the second round with a 28-20 victory. Roanoke Rapids, they squeak by Nash Central tonight in the 4A East, 14-12. Some 4A West scores to get to here. These are all presented by Talk It Out NC. West Stokes, a 39-3 win over Forbush. West Stanley, a 2-point win over Lexington. Joel, in the beginning of this show, previewed a little bit of why that was a big win for West Stanley. Tuscola hangs on, gets a 7-point win over East Burke. West Iredell shuts out Ashe County 45-0. Ford, a 21-19 win over Lake Norman Charter. And North Surrey, a 40-26 win over Salisbury. Bandy's, a massive win tonight, 71-14 against South Rowan. And how about this score? RS Central on the road, 48-6 over Wilkes Central. As Joel had mentioned, not the best showing tonight from Wilkes County. A couple more scores to get to here. The 3A East, Wallace Rose Hill hangs on. They hold off Green Central 37-36 tonight. Aiden Grifton, a 48-20 win over South Lenoir. Wake Prep, a 37-0 win over Bartlett Yancey. Farmville Central picks up a 56-28 win over Trask. Kinston, big victory for the Vikings, 53-7 against North Moore. Princeton, 54-18 against Bedingfield. South Columbus shuts out West Bladen 38-0. And Hertford County defeating Northwood 26-14. Our last set of scores here before we welcome on some more guests to the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. West Lincoln defeating North Wilkes 42-13. Hendersonville shutting out East Davidson 50-0. West Davidson 28-13 over Madison. East Surrey 35-15 over Polk County. Union Academy a road win against Owen 24-14. West Wilkes over Wheatmore. Shelby defeating McMichael 70-14. And Thomasville defeating Chase by a touchdown 14-7. I had mentioned that Forbush score when we were going through our 4A West bracket here. It was Forbush picking up a win over West Stokes 39-13. It was one of the few 16-17 matchups that did not come down to the wire. But High School OT's Leica BB was there covering it. He joins Joel Bryant and I now on the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. Leica, how did that one go for you with Forbush and West Stokes?
I just want to say I thought it would be a good game. Forbush won by a touchdown in the first game. One of the few rematches tonight that went completely opposite. Leica, take it away.
Well, guys, as you just mentioned, they played on October 3rd, and Forbush had a one-touchdown win over them. Tonight was all about the West Stokes run game, and it was really a balance of guys from Devin Gasly, Kamani Brown, Jay Taylor. Like, all three of them got in on the act. Defensively, I think they forced 3 turnovers, and it was really one-sided from the beginning, to be honest with you.
Did you get a chance to talk to the coach after?
Yes, and of course, I think most people that follow high school football in this state know that Coach Lohman has a winning pedigree. You know what he's done in East Surrey, and he's really brought a lot of winning culture to West Stokes. Remember, this team started 1-6, and this is their fourth consecutive their fourth consecutive win, including tonight. But next week will pose a big challenge as they travel to take on top seed Brevard out of the 4A West.
Yeah, you mentioned that. So the 4 straight wins over these are good teams. East Surrey, North Surrey, Surrey Central hasn't been great, but they're kind of rebounding. They're trying to rebound as a program. What they've done over the last month has been very impressive. They're playing like the team that people thought they would be coming into the year, which is always interesting when you're kind of right about a team the whole time, but they didn't look so good early on, but they end up being right in the end. So That's good. What do you think? I know it was such a dominant performance, but is there anything from tonight that you think needs to be sharpened up before that Brevard game?
They did. West Stokes did score 39 points, but they honestly could have had more. They had 3 drives stall out in plus territory, 2 inside the 10-yard line where they fumbled the football. So they're going to have to clean that up going into next week because Brevard will punish you if you make a mistake, for sure. But right now, they surely have a lot to celebrate, especially avenging that earlier loss to Forbush in a dominant fashion tonight.
I don't have anything else. Evan, do you have any questions?
No, that was like a BB had the West Stokes and Forbush game again. It was a lopsided one there as a big win was picked up in the 4A West there by West Stokes again. That was 39-3 the final there. Thanks for joining us tonight, Leica.
Appreciate you guys as always.
I'd mentioned it when we went through our 5A East scores. Let's pull those back up. Seaforth picked up a 29-28 win over South Brunswick. That's where Tim Hauer was. Tim's going to join us here. Tim, a tough loss for South Brunswick tonight. They fall by 1 score. That one came down to the wire. It was among many. How was the end of that one?
Absolutely nuts. In a short sentence. So just bonkers. Here we go. I'll give you a little recap of what happened. So 7-7 at halftime. And South Brunswick, only had the ball. So the third quarter, 27 plays for Seaforth, 4 for South Brunswick, but both teams scored a touchdown. So Seaforth had a huge drive, like 15 plays, 85 yards to start the second half. South Brunswick returned the ensuing kickoff. Then Seaforth went another 12-play drive. So they ran 27 plays in the third quarter before South Brunswick had run 1 offensive play in the third quarter. But then the fourth quarter was just bonkers. South Brunswick went up 28-14 with 2:35 left. So you're thinking, surely this is a South Brunswick victory, and it would have been their first since 2011 in the playoffs. But Seaforth comes back, scores really quickly with 1:09 left, and a really good decision by their coach. I've got to say, this was an outstanding decision because at that point they were down 28-20. He decided to go for 2 right there, which I loved because, even if you don't get the 2-point conversion, if you're able to score again, of course, you can go for the 2 again and try to send the game into overtime. Well, they got the 2-point conversion. So 28-22. They still had all 3 timeouts left, but they decided to go with the onside kick. It bounced off a couple South Brunswick players. Seaforth recovered, and then a 9-yard touchdown pass from, I don't have these guys' names right in front of me. Duncan Parker, the quarterback, he was outstanding tonight. To sophomore Noah Fuller for the game-winning touchdown, a 9-yard pass with 18.2 seconds left. At that point, they just needed the extra point to take the lead, and they were able to get it. So you guys would know better than me, but from what I was able to research, I think this was Seaforth's first playoff game.
It was, yes.
And then their first win. So they celebrated like a team that had never been here before. And, as obviously as disappointing as it is for the South Brunswick fans, the people down here, as exciting for Seaforth. And I got to say, with looking at their roster, a lot of sophomores, a lot of juniors, I think this is a program that looks to be in pretty good hands. Of course, not in my coverage area, so I don't see them. This is the only time I've seen them, but I liked what I saw from Seaforth tonight.
So Tolbert Matthews, who's the head coach you mentioned there, going for 2 points there. He's new to Seaforth. They got him from Fayetteville State University, where he was an assistant. So he's coming from the college ranks, and he has a pretty impressive coaching staff that he's built. Tobias Palmer, who recently played in the NFL, who's from nearby Northwood High School, played at NC State. He's on staff. So a big win there for the Hawks, picking up their first win in their first attempt in the football playoffs.
Tim, were you able to talk to Coach Daniel Yao from South Brunswick after the fact? Because it's got to be mixed feelings, right? Because they went from 0-10 last year to now having this new opportunity and the new realignment. They get sent down to 5A. They're in this new Southeastern 3A, 4A, 5A. They end up winning a co-conference championship. I don't know the last time South Brunswick's done that in football. It's got to be mixed feelings for them, right?
Yeah. Of course, obviously disappointed with the outcome tonight. But like you said, in the post-game huddle and afterwards, he was just trying to remind these kids of how special this season was and what they've done to kind of bring South Brunswick football back. Earlier this season, they were celebrating having broken the longest losing streak in the state. So, I mean, if you would have told, I think, anybody with that program, you're going to be 7-4 at the end of the season, before the season started, every single person would have taken that, obviously.
Yeah.
Now that it happened, you feel like you should be 8-3 and moving into the second round. So it is disappointing and it stings, but like Seaforth, their running back's a sophomore. They've got a junior. They've got a stud sophomore receiver and Edward Young. So there's some pieces for South Brunswick to build upon. And of course, that conference is going to help not having to play these big Wilmington schools in the conference.
Especially combined with the new RPI formula where your own winning percentage is high now. It's higher than what it was. Before you go quickly, any quick reactions to the other scores from your area? I know Ashley had the big road win at Cary. New Hanover had the win over Heritage. Any other reactions?
Yeah, I think, that Ashley game, as crazy as it was when that bracket came out, Coach Lombardi at Ashley texted me and he said, I really like this matchup. And obviously they took care of business tonight. That's the third straight year that they're into the second round of the playoffs. So while this program, 9 wins last year, only 3 coming into tonight, seemed like it was a bit of a down year. They're still back to where they were, right, with that 9-win team, which is in the second round of the playoffs. Now it comes, can you get over the hump? Because they've not been to a third round. It's obviously going to be tough to do that next week. I think they get Hillside, next week. But Ashley, I think that's probably the most impressive win out of anybody down here in this area.
Well, I think that's a sign of, build the culture that Coach Lombardi has built, because they, lose such a star athlete the last couple of years that it helped get them to that second round. So to have that turnover and still be sitting there second round, I think something really impressive there as Ashley gets a 14-13 win on the road tonight at Cary. Thank you for joining us tonight, Tim. Glad you got a good one. Seaforth picking up a big win over South Brunswick. That is the first playoff win for Seaforth. That's Tim Hauer from Coastal Preps joining us tonight here on the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. Thanks, Tim.
Yep, thanks, guys.
So we've been going all around the state looking at all these different final scores. At the top of the show, we were going through 6A, 7A, and 8A scores. And when we were talking about the 6A West, we brought up that St. Stephen's Mount Tabor game that was entering overtime. In double overtime, we now have the final from that one, and that is St. Stephen's holding on for the 24-23 win over Mount Tabor. Our friends at Scoreboard Radio, David and Jeff, were there on the call of that one. St. Stephen's, for those who may not know, out in the 8-8, St. Stephen's entered this year with 3 wins over their previous 2 seasons. They now sit in the second round of the playoffs with 6 victories this year. Guys, what a win tonight for St. Stephen's.
Our sound went off again, just like last
Right.
week.
Did you go to us? The sound goes off.
I don't know what it is, but we'll talk about it. Overtime victory for St. Stephen's. It was their first home playoff game since 1991. They went to the second round that year, and their first. So obviously tonight is their first home playoff win since 1991. In David's pregame opening, he talked about the Persian Gulf War. He talked about the cell phones just coming into use. Chuck Knoll was still coaching the Steelers in 1991. Duke was just winning their first national championship. So how things have changed. But for St. Stephen's to get that win tonight, it's their first playoff win since 2015 when they made it to the second round. So a lot of history that happened here tonight. I'll let David tell you a little bit about how the game went.
Yeah, it was a low-scoring game, guys. 7-6 at halftime. We end up tied at 14 late in the ball game. Our player of the game was the St. Stephen's kicker, Chatham Donley. He knocked through a 32-yard field goal with about 6.5 to go. Mount Tabor drives down. They answer with a game-tying field goal, 17 apiece. We go to overtime. Mount Tabor wins the toss and defers. St. Stephen's scores on the very first play, 10-yard rushing touchdown for Jairus Chisholm that kicked the extra point. Mount Tabor, after a little consternation, gets it in the end zone. So it's 24-23. The Spartans decide to go for two. They've had success off tackle with the stretch play all night. Mount Tabor gets it in the end zone, 2-point conversion. They celebrate, but a holding call takes the 2 points off the board. And by ours, Jeff has the holding yards, but Mount Tabor had 2 rushing touchdowns, a punt return touchdown, and the game-winning 2-point conversion erased by penalties. That puts them into a 27-yard PAT attempt to tie it and send it to double overtime. They missed that kick under duress, just left, and St. Stephen's gets the 24-23 victory. They advance to play Watauga next week, who St. Stephen's shut out Watauga in the second half. 28-18, Watauga won that game, but should be a good matchup next Friday night in Boone. And just a terrific win. It was a great atmosphere here tonight, a terrific crowd, and can't say enough good things about Kyle Lohman and his staff. Just a great, great win for this program.
Real quick before we get to your question, guys, penalties. David mentioned 16 penalties called against Mount Tabor for 152 yards. Of those 16 penalties, 12 holding calls. Not much better for St. Stephen's. They had 13 penalties called against them, 100 yards. 6 of those were holding calls. So obviously this referee crew tonight, point of emphasis was holding. So they a lot of holding calls there, a total of 18 holding calls on that one. Joel, the question that you text me, because we're having some sound difficulty hearing you guys, but you said, what's the biggest difference between St. Stephen's this year and last year? As you alluded to, haven't won a lot of games. Matter of fact, Kyle, as he comes in, Kyle Lohman in his 5th season at St. Stephen's, 14-36 overall. If you've been from around the Catawba Valley, Bandy's football was an afterthought until they got into the 1990s. And Coach Lohman, Kyle Lohman's dad, Coach Lohman, Randy Lohman, took over that Bandy's program. And they had some lean years early. And it kind of reminds you a little bit of Frank Beamer taking over Virginia Tech in the 80s. They had some lean years, but they stuck with the process, got into the weight room, put their system in. And I think Kyle is doing the same thing at St. Stephen's that his dad did at Bandy's High School back in the mid to late 90s before they started having their run of success. They're just building a culture here of winning. They've got some seniors mixed in, but it's still mostly a young team. They're leaning on the run, mixing in just enough pass to do it, but they've got some good-looking athletes. And I think the culture here, St. Stephen's for a long time has always lived in the shadow of Hickory. And district lines have been redrawn. Some things have happened, but now St. Stephen's finds themselves as the biggest Catawba County school. And demographics have changed a little bit with St. Stephen's. You look at Hickory, the growth of Hickory has come towards the Springs Road area, come towards North and East Hickory. And so they're getting the benefit, kind of like East Lincoln has had over the last couple of years with the population growth. So to answer your question, I think from the 30,000 foot view, if you want just a football answer, Kyle Lohman's following the same path that his dad did as head coach at Bandy's. We're just going to trust the process, build it through the weight room, put in our offense and build it that way. But I think there's some more economic factors when you look at the growth of Hickory, and they're starting to get some of the population shifts and get some better athletes to draw from.
I'll add to the coaching standpoint. You've got a very competent senior quarterback in Rylan Milligan who can run the ball, but he's also got a great arm. He can throw it. And from a player perspective, you bring up a kid that was on JV last year, Izzy Payne, kind of a quick, shutterbugging, a scat back who's good in the hole. Now, he didn't run wild tonight, but he did enough to keep the pass defense, honest for Mount Tabor. So I think Izzy Payne compliments a very cool and calculated Kyle Lohman. He doesn't get excited, does a great job. And for the second round matchups, pulling it up, I'm a High Brighton guy. They get the conference rematch with RS Central next week. That was a game that was close through about a quarter and a half, 2 quarters in Lower Creek. High Brighton sitting on the couch this week watching that one. I think you've got to look at the Watauga St. Stephen's game. The Indians gave the Pioneers their closest game of the year by far, 10 points last week. Jeff, what else do you have kind of around the area?
Well, I think Kramer and Bandy's is going to be a good matchup as well, too. We have another local matchup between 2 teams in the 4A, right, Newton Conover and Fred T. Ford. Fred T. Ford, by the way, congratulations to the Tigers. First ever home playoff win tonight. It was their first home playoff game in 17 years, but their first ever home playoff win. So congratulations to the Tigers. They get Newton Conover. I don't want to get ahead of my skis, but I'm looking forward in that 4A West to what will be possibility of being 2 great third round matchups. You have a possibility of number 3 Newton Conover against number 6 Maiden, and you have a possibility, the way that Bandy's played last week against Hickory and putting up 71 points tonight, you have the possibility in the third round of Bandy's taking on Highbright in the third round, but we got to get past the second round next week.
And again, as I know we can't hear you guys, we'll wrap up. The big debate for us, the big question going into next week is, will these teams, the Hickories, the Freedoms, the Highbrightons, the Wataugas from our area, it'll be rest versus rust. You're coming in and facing a quality opponent that's coming off of a win into the second round. You guys have been setting for 10 days, 12 days, 14 days without a game. Rest versus rust is always something big. So we had a great one tonight. Appreciate that. Guys can check out our show tomorrow. If you're in the Catawba Valley on Kicks 103.3, we start at 9 a.m. If you're outside the area, we had folks listening in Abilene, Texas tonight. We had people listening in Florida tonight. We had people listening all over. So you can find that at gofoothills.com. Click on the Listen Live button for Kicks 103.3. We'll have highlights from this game and all these scores starting at 9.
I will say real quick, if you're looking for the classic 12-5 upset next week in the second round, the 12-5 upset, and I'll go off of what David said, West Henderson in the 5A West coming down to take on East Lincoln. East Lincoln has had 2 weeks off. And if I'm the coach of East Lincoln, I don't want 2 weeks off. You get the bye week at the end of the season, and then you get that first round bye. Sure, you get everybody healthy, but that's just too long to be off this time of year. So West Henderson wins tonight, 42-7. It wouldn't surprise me if West Henderson pulls the upset against East Lincoln next week.
Wow, Wake Forest fans are mad with that one.
Well, that is Jeff Link and David Jones from Scoreboard Radio. They had listeners from all over, including Joel and myself in Raleigh tonight, as St. Stephen's picked up the double overtime win, 24-23 over Mount Tabor. We're going to take another break here on the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. When we come back, we're going to bring Joel Bryant back into the show and break down some of the results and get through some of these final scores that are coming in from across the state.
Don't fall for the myths. Get the facts about underage drinking.
Myth. Teens bounce back fast and teenage athletes can perform just fine after a night of drinking alcohol. The fact is, alcohol can hinder athletic performance for up to 3 days, delaying recovery and causing long-term issues with muscle loss and weakness. But don't just take it from me.
Choosing not to drink as an underage athlete has really helped me significantly. I've been able to focus, keep my priorities straight, and it's helped me separate myself from, many other people.
Get more facts at talkitoutnc.org.
Show presented by Talk It Out NC. Evan Moesta here with you. Let's get some more scores from around the state of North Carolina. We had not, I believe we dove into 3A West before we last took a break. Let's go into the 2A West now. Let's see where Albemarle picked up a 21-15 win over Cherokee. North Roran 55-10 over Avery County. Hayesville a shutout win over Highland Tech. Mountain Island Charter 40-7 winners over Elkin. Mitchell defeating Langtree Charter 51-13, and Cherville defeating South Stokes 55-12. There are a lot of buys in the 2A bracket as we jump around and look at some of those scores from around North Carolina. A close one, though, in the 2A East. That is where Camden County defeats West Columbus in a 16-17 battle. The final score of that one, 33-30. Northampton County 50-7 over Lejeune. Union on the road, 28-26 over Northwest Halifax tonight. Pamlico falling to Southside 52-28. And then Rosewood on the road at A.L. Johnston 52-26, the final score in that one. Let's get to some 1A scores as well. CPLA falling tonight at home to Andrews 42-34. Winston-Salem Prep defeating Chatham Central. Second time they've played one another in the last 2 weeks, 30-12 the final there. Rosman defeating Bonnie Cone. North Edgecombe, how about this one? On the road defeating Washington County 26-12, a big win there for North Edgecombe. And then Homgood Charter defeating Weldon 44-14. The only playoff game that we don't have a final score for quite yet is that Columbia Sally B. Howard game. If you happen to have that score, head on over to HighSchoolOT.com. You can hit the report scores tool there and get that score for us between Howard and Columbia. I bring in I bring in Joel Bryant now to the High School OT postgame show. Joel here, lots of scores. We've gone through all of them from across the state of North Carolina. Joel, what has stood out to you as you look at some of these final scores from across the state?
Another storyline from tonight, I think, is the rematches kind of going the opposite way. We talked about that West Stokes Forbush game earlier in the show. Roanoke Rapids beat Nash Central tonight after losing to Nash Central earlier in the season, and that North Edgecombe score we just showed with North Edgecombe being Washington County. These teams actually played twice this season already. Washington County won one of those matchups 53-0, and they also won another one by 12 points. So North Edgecombe suddenly winning it by 14 is just one of those kind of wild things. People say, the playoffs are a whole new season, and that's certainly the case for North Edgecombe.
That score, Joel, that we had missing, that Howard Columbia score, that's now final. 49-0, Sally B. Howard gets the win. So every final score in the state of North Carolina is on HighSchoolOT.com right now. Nobody else has that. So if you want to see all of the live brackets, see all of the second round matchups, see all of the final scores from tonight, there's only one place that you can find it, and it's going to HighSchoolOT.com. Those are all final. Carry on, Joel.
Yeah, and that the fact that Howard is a player now in the 1A East, this is happening very fast in 1A East, where there's now 3 charter schools who are in the second round. It's Howard's, Wilson Prep, and I believe Kip Pride is also a charter school. J-Mike can yell at me if I'm wrong on that. We're right. J-Mike's right. So there's now 3 charter schools in the 1A East, and they are getting good fast. Wilson Prep, of course, made it to the 1A East final last year. Corbian made it to the 1A state championship from the West. They're now in the 2A classification. And that's the thing about it. So now that we expand the classifications, there's a lot of opportunities for these charter schools in the 1A East now between Wilson Prep, Kip Pride, and now Howard, which is also in Wilson. So we're going to see, I think, a Wilson Prep Kip Pride game come to a head here in a couple of weeks, and that'll be a fascinating one. I do want to mention on the 1A West side, so Rosman beating another charter school, by the way, Bonnie Cone, they beat them 38-28. That's Rosman's first playoff win since 2015. So it's always good to see those kind of streaks broken. And obviously,
Rosman 2 years ago.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, they had the losses. They had the longest losing streak in the state a couple of years ago. Tyree Allen, the new coach there, he's done an outstanding job. Just getting the most out of that program. It's a tough situation. They've never been great, and you had Brevard just north of them in that county. Brevard's obviously a good program, and people who follow high school football usually know what that means. So good job for Tyree Allen and getting Rosman on track, and now they're a playoff winner. So that's cool for them. And I think J. Mike alluded to this earlier. It's the new opportunities with the new playoff system that are, they're kind of sweet for these schools. We can have like the big picture arguments about, just like rewarding everybody, but when it comes down to it, when you get stuff like that Rosman win for the first time since 2015, that's definitely sweet.
Yeah, I'm bringing J. Mike here to the show as well. J. Mike, as we kind of go through things here, anything stick out to you? Obviously, you're kind of seeing some of these final scores come in as well. Some pretty crazy games so far tonight.
Yeah, I think. Number one, there's some blowouts, but I think there was less blowouts in the football first round than we saw in some of the other bracketed sports that have started.
That's true. Everything in volleyball was a sweep in that first round.
Yeah, exactly. And tennis especially was, obviously lopsided in the first round. But here in football, I think in football, you just don't have the opportunity to schedule as many people as you could that might match up better. And some teams really took advantage of that tonight. It took a little while to figure it out. And like I said, it's just, if you're Fred T. Ford and you win your first home playoff game since whenever, it doesn't really matter to someone to say, well, a lot of teams got in the playoffs. It won't matter 5 years from now or 4 years from now or even 4 days from now. The win is what matters in that community. And I think that's what's going to take it forward. I think I was kind of worried about this round in football being so ugly that people would clamor for, kind of going to a proposing a whole bunch of changes that would take us back to some of the things that weren't working out as well with our previous playoff setup. But it's really been neat to see all across the board. And I think we've talked about this tonight. coaches that are like, hey, like a week off, I don't really want that. I think it is an issue if you have 2 weeks off. I think it's also an issue maybe if you are the 8 waiting on the 9, but not as much if you're the 1 waiting on the 16. Not as much for those guys. The last time we really had a whole lot of buys, I think, Joel, you remember this, we also had different seeding. And so that a really good 2 seed would go into a conference champion and then sometimes just beat the brakes off of them because they just picked up a strong win the week before and they were just way more ready for that game, among other reasons. But now it's a true 16 versus a 1, and it's a true 8-9. And that to me is also beneficial to see with the new seeding, because last year we know, oh my gosh, we beat the 9 seed. It's an upset. And you think, well, actually the 9 seed in this bracket, for whatever reason, has 5 wins. You have to kind of do all that. We don't have to do that anymore. And that's such a relief, I think. The seeds match up.
Joel, I was going to ask you, looking forward to next week, what sticks out to you the most about some potential matchups entering next week's fold?
Yeah, so we were talking about these rematches, right? So with the I wanted to get into this game actually a little bit. So the Green Central and Wallace Rose Hill played in just kind of this thriller game earlier, where Wallace Rose Hill held on 37-36. Green Central had a chance at the end where they had an onside kick attempt and went out of bounds with a minute left. Now Wallace Rose Hill, the 16th seed, goes to play the 1A seed James Keenan, who they just played last week and lost by a touchdown. James Keenan is my pick to get to the 3A state championship out of the East, and Wallace Rose Hill is clearly one of the teams that's suited to have a shot at taking them down. So that is instantly probably the most anticipated game of the second round for me, is that Wallace Rose Hill James Keenan rematch. That's going to be a good one.
One other thing to look forward to, as you reported earlier this week, Grimsley is going to have the return of the number 1 player in the nation, Faison Brandon, its quarterback, next Friday night for its second round matchup. What do you expect out of this? Because their freshman quarterback, who filled in the interim, Brody Lowe, was more than serviceable.
Yeah, you'll see it in this interview I had with Coach Brown earlier today. I told him like what they got out of Brody Lowe is like probably far beyond what they even could have imagined best case scenario. He was just outstanding for the situation he was in as a freshman, being thrust into this position where he's now like leading the number 1 team in the state. That's a lot of pressure for a freshman, and he really passed the test with flying colors. But of course, Faison Brandon is the number 1 prospect in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. His playoff run last year is the single best, quarterback stretch I've ever seen. I was at a lot of those games last year where he was just making all the right throws in the fourth quarter. There's just something about him. There's like this clutch factor about him where he shows up biggest when the game's on the line. And it's really hard if you have that guy on your team just to say, we're going to leave this guy on the sideline
and he
when we're going
to be
back
the top recruit in the country.
That's what I'm saying. Like
yeah.
you just can't leave him there. Like, I understand, like, it's tough for the kid Brody Lowe. He's done nothing to lose that job, frankly. If you look at it that way. But his story will continue next year, and that team will be very good next year with him as a starter, I suspect. But
it's
yeah,
definitely going to help having gotten 10 weeks under his belt.
Yeah. And then again, if you think about it this way, like, what if something happens to Faison in the playoffs, where like a different injury or something? The fact that Brody Lowe has all this experience, he has the 9 games for the regular season where he's gotten a lot of the kinks worked out. That could also be a benefit as well. Yeah, you can't, if the doctors say he can play, if the doctors say his hand is good, if Tennessee is okay with him playing, you have to let Faison Brandon play, because you're going for a state championship. People will say that 7A is going to be probably the top state championship this year. I think 7A is probably better than 8A overall, so I think it's probably the crown jewel. If you can go and win that state championship with a guy like that, I think you gotta try to do it.
And Joel mentioned here, Faison Brandon, the way he plays in big games and the way he elevates his performance when the lights are brightest. The game that he sustained his injury was a 1-point overtime win in a number 1 versus number 2 battle with West Charlotte to open the year at Bank of America Stadium. arguably one of the biggest regular season stages you can be on, and he delivered there prior to missing the next 10 weeks with an injury.
Yeah.
Joel had a chance earlier today to catch up with the head coach of the Whirlies, Daryl Brown, talk a little bit more about the situation between Lowe and Faison Brandon and how that's going to work and what the Whirlies are expecting over the next couple of weeks as they begin their pursuit of a second straight state championship. Again, this was earlier today. Grimsley next Friday, they will face West Cabarrus, who picked up a very narrow win tonight on the road in a 16-17 battle with RJ Reynolds. But here's Joel's interview with Daryl Brown.
And we're joined by Daryl Brown here on the HighSchoolOT post-game show. Coach Brown is off this week. His team has a bye, number 1 seed Grimsley Whirlies. Coach, how did you want to approach this week? I know that, you might have had buys in the past for different reasons, but now we have the buys kind of programmed into the playoffs. How did you want to approach it this week?
Yeah, for us, it was really a focus on ourselves, trying to make sure that, we spent some time getting better at some things that we felt like we needed to work on, which was some situational stuff. Like we spent a day working on our end-of-game situations and 2-minute offense and defense. We had a day where we spent working on some third down situations, third and medium, third and longs. A lot of fundamentals before that with our individuals, some tackling circuit, ball security. Just things that sometimes may get overlooked a little bit throughout the year, but we had some time to go work on those. And then also we gave our guys a couple of days off. We want to try to get our legs back under us and just kind of get going, make sure we're fresh and ready to go come next week.
Good. So, obviously big news this week is that Faison's been cleared to come back. Faison Brandon, of course, number 1 player in the country, star quarterback. Obviously, you've had exceptional play from the freshman Brody Lowe. He's probably played even better than your wildest dreams could have been in place of Faison. Just what was kind of your role in the process, and just what's kind of going through the team's mindset and your mindset now that he's back?
Yeah, well, when Faison got injured on week 1, and we found out early the second week, about Tuesday morning, that he would be having to have surgery on his hand. From that point on, obviously we were focused on, just being the best we could be with our team and Brody taking over. And at that point, we were already kind of game plan ready to go for West Forsyth, so we didn't change anything. And Brody was ready, to run our offense, and he did a great job over the next 9 weeks. And obviously is a big reason why we're where we're at right now. Getting Faison back at this time of the year obviously is a huge plus for us. A guy that's played in a lot of big games. He's experienced the state playoffs. He kind of understands what we're about to go through and the gauntlet that we're about to have to go through. So just his experience, his leadership, getting it back at this time of the year, I think is huge. And then obviously, he wanted to get back. He worked extremely hard, rehabbing and getting himself ready to get back and play. He wanted to finish his high school career on the field with his teammates and with a lot of guys that he spent a lot of his youth and high school career playing with. He's got a lot of great friends that's a part of the senior class with him, and he wanted to make sure that he was able to be on the field with them and finish things up with those guys. So he's practiced with us the last couple of weeks, throwing the ball around, and then this week, obviously, we was able to kind of get him back in with our first offense and getting some live action with some of that situational stuff that I was talking about earlier.
Awesome. And last up, we don't know who you're playing yet because we're taping this before the game happens. But I do want to ask one more question about your team. What's kind of surprised you about your team this year? What's been kind of a key piece of development throughout the roster that you're pretty pleased with?
Well, I've been really pleased with just how many guys we have that stepped up and have done a lot of really good things for us. I mean, you see offensively, it's a different guy every night. We play a couple different backs. They both have performed really well. We got the majority of our receiving core back, and all those guys have made plays for us throughout the season. It's not like you look at our stats or our game and you see just one guy dominating. Last year there might be a time where Mitchell Summers, 35 carries, 200 yards or whatever it may be. This year it's just a lot of different guys on the offensive side of the ball, and then same way defensively. We kind of had an alpha in Bryce Davis on the defensive side. And this year has been a collective unit. We got a lot of guys that play really hard, that play tough, and we're playing really well together. So, we just got a lot of guys contributing, guys that have bought into, again, the things that we ask out of them. And we're getting good play from a lot of different individuals. So the fact that we had that going on, as we head into playoffs is really good. And I'm counting on a lot from those guys, and we expect a lot out of them.
Awesome. Well, Coach Brown, appreciate it as always. We'll see top seed Grimsley back in action next week, the second round of the 7A playoffs. Coach Brown, enjoy the rest of your night and enjoy the upcoming week of preparation.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate it.
Well, that was Joel Brown with the head coach of Grimsley High School, Joel Bryant with Daryl Brown, excuse me. The head coach at Grimsley. Grimsley next Friday is facing West Cabarrus, who defeated RJ Reynolds tonight, and they will do so with the number one player in the country back in action. That is quarterback Faison Brandon. That'll do it for this week's episode of the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. If you have not already, head over to HighSchoolOT.com right now. It is your only place that you can see live brackets for all 8 classifications and final scores from every first-round matchup. Yes, that's 11:30 p.m. right now. Every first-round matchup is in the books. The final scores for every game across the state of North Carolina in all 8 classifications can be found on HighSchoolOT.com, and that statewide scoreboard is presented by our partners at Talk It Out NC. Just like winning all of these big games that you see on HighSchoolOT.com, preventing underage drinking takes teamwork. Parents and teens, you can visit TalkItOutNC.org. TalkItOutNC.org is your place for resources to start the conversation about the risks of underage drinking. Join Talk It Out NC and cheer on safe and smart choices. For Evan Moesta, Joel Bryant, J. Mike Blake, and everybody else who helped make this first round of the playoffs possible on HighSchoolOT.com, we wish you well and wish you a good weekend. We'll see you next Friday night for the second round of the state playoffs here in North Carolina. This has been the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC.
Don't fall for the myths. Get the facts about underage drinking.
Myth: teens bounce back fast and teenage athletes can perform just fine after a night of drinking alcohol. The fact is, alcohol can hinder athletic performance for up to 3 days, delaying recovery and causing long-term issues with muscle loss and weakness. But don't just take it from me.
Choosing not to drink as an underage athlete has really helped me significantly. I've been able to focus, keep my priorities straight, and it's helped me separate myself from, many other people.
Get more facts at TalkItOutNC.org.